James Henderson from Dan Harland will start by sharing his experiences and talk about customer engagement strategies. Dan Harland's a partner of ours here in the region. They help us with local implementations and deployments. So very happy to have him with us presenting. James, over to you.
One of the first projects I ever did when I came to the GCC was for tires. We had an issue. The amount of profit that we were making wasn't the amount that we wanted. The service level that we were being told was dismal. It was really bad. So the first thing we did was to do an analysis. I looked at the demand. I looked to see how much we were selling every single day. And this was the result that we came up with. As you can see, we were selling 1 or 2 every single day. Then the last 3 days of the month, we had these massive increases in sales. So I was trying to work out what that could be for. Why did we have this change? And I was thinking, maybe people get paid around the 28th. Therefore, they're going to go and buy all of their stock on the 28th, right? Could be, but not that size. The other thing is that obviously, our sales managers start whipping all the sales team and they try and get it to get the targets. Again, makes sense, but it can't get to that kind of level. So I did what like anyone should do. I actually went to the service site and I looked. I said, okay, what's happening here? And I was expecting that there should be like maybe 1 car there in a day. When I got there was 2 cars on the lift. There was a car waiting, right? I was like, well, this doesn't seem right. So I walked into the manager's office and I opened one of his drawers. And the first thing I saw was this. Piles and piles of handwritten invoices, like thousands of handwritten invoices. And so we said to them, what are you doing? The answer was, well, the customer comes, I fit the tire, I take his money, and then he drives off. But if I actually want to do this on the system, it takes 15 to 20 minutes. So to actually sell a tire was 15, 20 minutes of system work to do it. Now, these guys were trying to sell. They're technicians, they weren't the IT people. So all they were doing is just handwriting it. And then the last 3 days of the month, they'd sit there up until like 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, putting this into the system, trying to get it up to speed. Now, there's a few other things that they're doing in there as well, which is when they hit their target, they then leave the rest of them in the drawer. But hopefully that's not entirely the case. So why is this? It's not because these guys are bad. It's not because they're trying to do something wrong. And the test that I always kind of put in this place is, if I was doing their job, would I do the same thing? And honestly, I probably would, right? You want to get the customer out. You want them to be moving fast. If you've got to ask the customer to wait there for 20 minutes whilst you type something to the system, it's not going to work. So this is an example of frictional costs, where adding the little bit of time on has a massive impact on your end customer and your end result. Now, it sounds like, okay, that means that the guys are working some overtime at the end of the month, there's a bit of cost. But we did the analysis. The reason that we were losing profit was because they didn't have the right stock. We had very, very good tires that we bought at wholesale. And instead of using them, they'd use them on the first day. And then what they'd do is they'd get local purchase because they didn't have the tires. They didn't have the tires because we didn't know we sold them. So as far as our systems were concerned, we had perfect stock and they weren't using it. But in reality, they had no stock. And so therefore they were going outside. In total, the cost was about 3 million dirhams a year profit loss. And that was all because their IT systems were harder to use. Now, this is really well known when it comes to the B2C setup. If you look at Amazon, they did an analysis that said for every 100 milliseconds, there's a 1% loss in profit. So if you have any delays, then they start losing money straight away. I also talked to one of the senior engineers of Talabat, and they were saying, like, when they're deciding on placing an order for a burger, Talabat's a massively complex organization. There's 18,000 different restaurants on there, and they're all integrated. But if you have to wait 10 seconds to decide you want to have a burger, you just don't. You go and cook something else. You go and do something else. So therefore, that speed and that frictional cost is immense. So when you're looking at implementing systems and when you're looking at things, you need to not only just look at the calculation, you also need to look at how easy it is for your users to use. This example is one of the main reasons why we see issues when we're installing inventory stuff where the data does not align to the reality. This is one of the reasons why I really like after sales. There's 2 sides to it. One side is you have a lot of data and you have a lot of maths, right? So you can calculate these massive calculations and do a lot of kind of like use data science and all this other stuff. But the other side of it is the psychology. It's the how do people think? How do customers think? Which is important. And if you can utilize both of these, so yes, have the great systems, have the great data, but also understand what you're supposed to be trying to achieve, that's when you get greatness. That's when you get great service levels. So this is the Synchron Pareto screen. I'm sure you've all seen it in your inventory policy. This is where you look at the amount of stock you have compared to the service level. The more stock you have, the higher service level if you balance it correctly. So if you want to have a high service level, you need to increase it. So you should all be very, very aware of it, at least the inventory people. Pricing, you can be let off. But the question is what service level should you be trying to achieve? And also, what type of service level is important? So we all kind of use this calculation just to say, I want a 98% service level. But in reality, that's not what your customer wants. That's not what's important to your end customer. They have a difference between different service levels on what parts they have is what service level. So a simple example, an oil filter. If I drove into any of your locations and you didn't have an oil filter for my car, I would be annoyed, right? If they said, actually, it's going to take me 4 hours to get the oil filter, your customers are going to be upset. They're going to say, how can you do that? That's ridiculous. Same time, if you get something like this engine valve timer, if you went in and they said, yeah, we can have that fixed for you tomorrow, you'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I'll wait till tomorrow. There's no difference. The extreme example is if I've crashed my car and they tell me, yeah, it's going to be 3 weeks until I get the part, I'm not necessarily upset. If they say they fix my entire car in 3 weeks, that sounds reasonable, right? So when you're measuring service level and when you're doing your settings, you need to make sure you take into account what your customers are actually expecting, not just looking for that mathematical perfect service level increase. Because there are ways you can get a higher service level, but your customers are more annoyed. So you need to take this into account. And this in behavior science is called the expectation to outcome gap. It's the situation where if you have an expectation and it is not matched, the outcome of that is just unacceptable. The effect is significantly more than what the actual result is. So another example of how behavioral science can be effective I'll give you an example of a body shop that we worked with about a year ago. So they wanted to change their pricing, right? They wanted to make more money. So their write-off was, please, can we make some more money in body shop? So we looked at the pricing setups. Now, most of you are probably aware, body shop's a bit weird, right? You don't have customers per se. You don't have any retail customers. In a body shop, you probably are dealing with 5 to 10 customers because the customer is the insurance agency. So when you're doing these configurations, you actually only have these small customers and you have these adjusters, and their full-time job is to basically come and tell you your price is wrong and trying to get that price down. So one thing we did is we looked and analyzed the parts which the adjusters were requesting. And we were saying like, okay, these are the parts that they know the price of. And if you went and talked to an adjuster, if you asked for their bumper, they would say the price down to the fill. They know exactly what they were looking for. But most of their parts, they had no idea. Most of their parts, they just were put onto the list and it came up there and they went, yeah, that's fine, right? So we did this change where what we did is we went and we identified the parts where they were questioning the price. We dropped their price down slightly. We gave them like a 1 or 2% discount. And then everything else, we increased the price. The outcome of that is we got a letter from one of the insurance companies. And the insurance company said to us, thank you very much. Your new pricing policy is significantly better than it's ever been. You've finally made sense. Whilst we were taking about a 3% increase on the total cost. So again, there's a lot of science in pricing, but also you've got to get that psychology bit. So this is called like the loss leader effect. This also can be used in many different ways. So when you're talking to your dealers, you can do exactly the same thing. Identify the parts where you have the frictional pricing, make sure they're competitive, make sure you're the cheapest on the market. Everything else, increase it. Especially if you're dealing with things like grey imports. Because when you're dealing with grey imports, the stock that's in your location, they probably don't have. They'll have stock within your country, but that stock is only going to be for 1,000 parts. Everything else, you're probably the only one who can get it, And if you don't have it, you're probably the only one who can get it fast because you have the agreement with your supplier. Everyone else has to go via other way and import it. So you've got that opportunity. You need to make sure you utilize that opportunity. Last point, discounting. So this is kind of a well-known issue of mine is discounting. When I came to Dubai, I got told again and again that the GCC is a discount market. You cannot take away discounting. If you take away discounting, everyone's going to be upset. And to a certain extent, yeah, there is discounting is useful and stuff. And if you look at some of the studies, there's some really interesting studies. 75% of all people wait until there is a sale or a discount to make any large purchase. 33% of people in that same survey said that if there was a discount available and it was good enough, they would buy something that they did not want or were not shopping for. So to say discounting entirely is useless is a bit hard. But what I was seeing in our service centers was that the discounts were being gatekept by the service advisor. So someone would come in and say, I've got 1,000 dirhams for my service. And the service advisor will go, yeah, we'll do it for 600. I'll give you a 40% discount straight away. Now, the customer then goes, well, why are you giving me a discount? And then he says, well, can your supervisor give me a better discount? And so therefore he starts saying, oh, you did an awful job. Supervisor comes down, he gives him an extra discount. He gives him a 50% discount. And he thinks, well, if the supervisor can give a discount, what about the manager? And he goes to the manager. And at this point, he's going like, you guys are ridiculous. It's an awful situation. And he gets his 60% discount. Now, you'd think he'd walk out there going, oh, I'm happy. I've got a good discount. But he spent the last 2 hours arguing people, primarily telling us that we were awful. So it doesn't matter what happens. At the end of this, he's walking out upset. So how can we put in discounting without creating this situation? And also let our supervisors and managers actually do their job instead of being shouted at by their customers. To me, it's about the difference of what type of discount you give. There's two types of discount. There's unearned discount and there's earned discount. Now, an unearned discount is basically when you're giving it for no reason. There's no clarification why you get that. You just giving it, or you're giving it because you shouted at someone. An earned discount is where you can say, there is a reason why I've got this. I understand the principle behind this. So on an earned discount, you can say things like, if you're a customer who's been coming to us for the last 2 years, I'll give you a 20% discount. You can say, if you're working for the military, I'll give you a 10% discount. It doesn't necessarily even have to be hard to get the discount. So you can have like a reward program that just automatically gives it if you sign up to something or just fill in a piece of paper. But as soon as you're given that discount and it's earned and you feel that you've done something to achieve that discount, then it's no longer you arguing about it. It's a case of, yes, I've got it. The other major difference is it changes the relationship with the service advisor. The original service advisor was the gatekeeper. He was the one who's stopping you from saving money. Whereas in this situation, you're the helper. So have you ever been to a restaurant and the waitress has said, oh, have you got an entertainer or do you work for this place? And they go, oh yeah, and they give you 10% discount because they asked. You tip them and you go, oh, that was a good waitress. It was really good. So your service advisor changes their behavior to be supporting the customer rather than the one that doesn't give them the price. In addition to that, you can also use some other things like loss aversion within this. So all of you have a owner's manual. So every car says that you have to do every 10,000 K you've got to, or 6 months you've got to do it. But why don't you put in the discount link to that? Just say, look, as long as you come into us and you service on your owner's manual, we'll give you a 20% discount straight away. That means that if they are looking at missing a service, which when they get to kind of 60, 70 K, they probably are thinking, is it worth it? Then they've not only got the case of, okay, my car might be damaged, but then you've also got the side of, but then when I go back again, it costs me more and I lose my discount, I lose my privileged setup. So it utilizes something called loss aversion in order to get people to go in there and keep going into that. So that's my rambling bits on. I'm going to ask Andy to join us and talk through exactly what he's done.